Good day, everyone. Here is our group presentation about the summary report on Marxism. Now, giving you the brief introduction, Marxism is a theory based on the ideas of the philosopher Karl Marx. He was born in Germany in 1818 and died in London in 1883. Marxism is a political theory that analyzes how social class, money, and most importantly, the means of production or factories affect society. It is what is known as the conflict theory because it states that society is in conflict with each other. And Marxism claims that this conflict is between the rich and the poor. Now, Marxism, as we understand that in sociologists, it is a political and economic philosophy that view of the way things are, and suggestion is that where the society is headed. The danger is that we start to view it based on what we understand about its relationship between communism and the politics. Now, to really know and understand more about Marxism, here Marx outlines the now famous base superstructure account of social and historical development to be discussed by the other members of our group.
Classical Marxism refers to the economic, philosophical, and sociological theories expounded by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, as contrasted with later developments in Marxism, especially Marxism and Leninism. Karl Marx was a German philosopher, economist, historian, sociologist, political theorist, journalist, and socialist revolutionary. He argues that each significant period in history is constructed around a particular mode of production, that is, the way in which a society is organized to produce the necessaries of life. For example, food and shelter. In general terms, each mode of production produces specific ways of obtaining the necessaries of life, specific social relationships between workers and those who control the mode of production, and specific social institutions, including cultural ones. The heart of this analysis is the claim that how a society produces its means of existence, its particular mode of production. Ultimately, it determines the political, social, and cultural shift of that society and its possible future development. As Marx explains, the mode of production of material life conditions the social, political, and intellectual life process in general. This claim is based on certain assumptions about the relationship between base and superstructure. It is on this relationship between base and superstructure that the Marxist account of culture rests. The base consists of a combination of the forces of production and the relations of production. The forces of production refer to the raw materials, the tools, the technology, the workers, and their skills, and many more. The superstructure consists of institutions and definite forms of social consciousness generated by these institutions. The relationship between base and superstructure can be understood in a range of different ways. It can be seen as a mechanical relationship or economic determinism of cause and effect. What happens in the superstructure is a passive reflection of what is happening in the base. This often results in a vulgar Marxist reflection theory of culture, in which the politics of a text or practice are read of from, or reduced to, the economic condition of its production. The relationship of the both can also be seen as the setting of limits, the providing of a specific framework in which some developments are probable and others are unlikely. After Marx's death in 1883, Friedrich Engels, Karl Marx's friend, found himself having to explain through a series of letters many of the subtitles of Marxism to younger Marxists who, in their revolutionary enthusiasm, threatened to reduce it to a form of economic determinism. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels claimed that the ideas of ruling class are in every epoch the ruling ideas. The class, which is the ruling material force in society, is at the same time its ruling intellectual force. What they mean by this is that the dominant class, on the basis of its ownership of and control over the means of material production, is virtually guaranteed to have control over the means of intellectual production.
Good day everyone, I am Shekaina from Todoc, and my topic is all about Althusserianism. Louis Althusser was a French Marxist philosopher. His ideas had an enormous influence on cultural theory and popular culture. His most significant contribution to the field is his different attempts to theorize the concepts of ideology. Althusser begins by rejecting mechanistic interpretation of the base and superstructure formulation. He instead insists the concept of social formation. A social formation is a complex of concrete economic, political, and ideological relations, bound together and given their particular character as capitalist, feudal, or the fact that the economic relations are, in his words, determinant in the last instance. The relationship between the base and the superstructure is not one of expression, in which the superstructure is necessary to the existence of the base. So this model allows for the relative autonomy of the superstructure. This operates through what he calls the structures in dominance, because there is always a hierarchy of effectivity and always one element which plays a dominant role. However, although the economic is always ultimately determinant, this does not mean that in a particular historical conjuncture, it will necessarily be dominant. Like in feudalism, the political was in the dominant level. Nevertheless, the practice that is dominant in a particular social formation will depend on the specific form of economic production. Althusser advances two theses on ideology. First, ideology represents the imaginary relationship of individuals to the real conditions of existence. For ideology does not reflect the real world but represents the imaginary relationship of individuals to the real world. Althusser's theory differs from the conception of ideology held by previous Marxists is that it sees ideology as a permanent medium of delusion that must exist to bind man together into society. Even in a classless society, ideology is needed to give social cohesion to constitute individuals as imaginary subjects. Second is, ideology has a material existence, in which ideology does not exist in the form of ideas or conscious representations in the minds of individuals. Rather, ideology consists of the actions and behaviors of bodies governed by their disposition within materials apparatuses. For example, rituals, conventional behavior, and so on. Because ideology is for Althusser a closed system, it can only ever set itself such problem as it can answer, that is, to remain within its boundaries. It must stay silent on questions which threaten to take it beyond these boundaries. This formulation leads Althusser to concepts of the problematic. According to Althusser, a problematic consists of the assumptions, motivations, underlying ideas from which the text is made. He argues that if we are to fully understand the meaning of a text, we have to be aware of not only what is in a text, but also the assumptions which inform it. The task of an Althusserian critical practice is to deconstruct the text to reveal the problematic. To this, to perform what Althusser calls symptomatic whipping.
Good morning, everyone. I am Shanny C, Uriarte, and I will be the one to share to you a short summary about hegemony. Hegemony derives from the Greek term hegemonia, or dominance over, which was used to describe relations between city-states. Its use in political analysis was somewhat limited until its intensive discussion by the Italian politician and Marxist philosopher Antonio Gramsci. Gramsci's discussion of hegemony followed from his attempts to understand the survival of the capitalist state in the most advanced Western countries. Gramsci understood the predominant mode of rule of class rule and was interested in explaining the ways in which concrete institutional forms and material relations of production came to prominence. One of the most extensive applications of Gramsci's conception of hegemony has been to the analysis of international relations and international political economy via the so-called transnational historical materialism. So for more information about hegemony, try read other references to know more about Gramsci's application. That's all, and thank you.
Good day everyone, my name is Bethanie B, Melecio, and my topic is all about post-Marxism and cultural studies. Post-Marxism and cultural studies both explicitly engage with and take on the question of the political engagement and of ethical political university responsibility. Both are interested in intervention, but their relationship is far from simple, and the intellectual and political costs of ignoring its complexity are high. The main points in post-Marxism and cultural studies are the limits of Marxism in popular cultural studies, Laclau and Mouffe discourse, Stuart Hall articulation, culture as a set of practices around artifacts, culture as a set of meaning-making practices, and meaning-making practices as a site for struggle and debate. Angela McRobbie is a critic expanding on the limits of Marxism as a point of reference for cultural studies in terms of its essentialism, economism, Eurocentrism, and others. As Angela McRobbie observes, Marxism is no longer as influential in the past. Marxism, a major point of reference for the whole cultural studies project in the UK, has been undermined not just from the viewpoint of the postmodern critics who attack the teleological propositions, its meta-narrative status, its essentialism, economism, Eurocentrism, and its place within the whole Enlightenment period, but also, of course, as a result of the events in Eastern Europe with the discrediting of much socialist project. The concept of discourse is central to the development of post-Marxism. As Laclau explains, the basic hypothesis of a discursive approach is that the very possibility of perception, thought, and action depends on the structuration of a certain meaningful field which pre-exists any factual immediacy. For the same reason, it is the discourse which contributes the subject position of the social agent and not therefore the social agent which is the origin of the discourse. The usual interpretation of the relationship between cultural studies and post-Marxism is regularly conveyed in works of or about cultural studies, and it has several often problematic but nonetheless important dimensions.